Crystal grew up in a modest home filled with love, always believing Luma was her biological mother. Despite her fragile health, which seemed to worsen with each passing year, Luma never allowed her illness to diminish the bond she built with her daughter. Noah, on the other hand, was a dedicated man who worked at a restaurant and was always present for little Crystal, instilling in her the values she would carry for a lifetime. The harmony in their home was a direct reflection of the devotion Luma and Noah poured into it, despite their challenges. Nothing seemed more important to them than raising an honest, hardworking, and loving daughter. From a very young age, Crystal participated in daily activities with contagious joy. She helped around the house, and it never felt like a burden. It was a natural expression of love for the family she cherished so much. Even in her weakened state, Luma made it a point to guide her, teaching her about discipline and responsibility. Noah, always by their side, reinforced these teachings, ensuring Crystal grew up with a solid worldview where hard work and respect for others were fundamental. Every family meal, household task, and even moments of leisure had a careful rhythm, with set schedules and a peaceful routine. Studying was always a pleasure for Crystal. She was a dedicated student, inspired by her mother's determination to persevere despite hardships. Over time, this inspiration crystallized into a dream of helping others, and Crystal decided to pursue a career in nursing. She graduated with honors, and although Luma and Noah didn't have much money, they always encouraged her to follow her dreams. Crystal's eyes sparkled when she spoke about her chosen profession, and the pride Noah and Luma felt for their daughter was indescribable. Life seemed to be on a stable course until tragedy began to cast its shadow. Noah was the pillar of their home, always a steady presence, until the day a car accident suddenly claimed his life. Crystal, who was already strong, was forced to grow even stronger. The loss of her father was immense, but a greater purpose emerged. She had to take care of her mother, whose illness was progressing relentlessly. Luma, now more debilitated, became entirely dependent on her daughter. Crystal, by then a trained nurse, took on this responsibility with the same love and dedication her parents had taught her. The burden was heavy, but her inner strength was greater. And so, Crystal embarked on a new chapter of her life, filled with overwhelming responsibilities that she faced with courage. What she didn't yet realize was that life had more challenges and secrets in store for her than she could imagine. Her journey, marked so far by love and resilience, was about to become even more complex and profound. The day Crystal lost Noah changed everything. The house, once filled with life and laughter, was now plunged into an unbearable silence. Noah's absence was a void no one could fill. Yet, Crystal knew she couldn't allow herself to be consumed by grief. There was an unspoken promise in the years of love her parents had given her. She had to remain strong. Luma, her mother, was growing increasingly frail, and the weight of this new responsibility rested entirely on her shoulders. Taking care of her mother wasn't a choice, it was an act of love, and Crystal embraced it with every ounce of dedication she could muster. Luma's grief was different. Noah's loss struck her deeply, accelerating the disease that had been ravaging her body. Now bedridden and dependent, Luma looked at Crystal with eyes full of both gratitude and sorrow. She knew her daughter was carrying a burden far too heavy for someone so young, but she also took comfort in seeing her daughter's strength. Every act of care from Crystal, every change, every kind word as she brushed her mother's hair, was a testament not only to the love they shared but also to the unyielding resilience of a woman shaped by the best examples. For Crystal, caring for Luma was a constant reminder of the love Noah and Luma had shared over the years. Every day, as she prepared medications or helped her mother eat, she recalled how Noah always said family was the most important thing in the world. The memory of her father kept her grounded, even during long, exhausting nights and grueling days. She clung to his memory with a strength that prevented her from sinking into despair. Despite the pain, every moment with her mother was a way of honoring the life Noah had helped build. Crystal's life was now a balancing act between caring for her mother and working as a nurse. Her days were long, starting early at the hospital and ending late at home with Luma. Rest was a rare luxury, but Crystal never complained. To her, her mother's presence was a gift, even under such challenging circumstances. She knew their time together was uncertain, which made every minute precious. Even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, she smiled at her mother, showing that, despite everything, there was still hope, strength, and love to carry on. But despite all her courage, Crystal began to realize that things couldn't continue like this forever. The physical and emotional toll was building up, and something deep inside her hinted that change was on the horizon. What Crystal didn't yet know was that these changes wouldn't just stem from her mother's illness, but also from new people and situations that would soon enter her life, shaking the foundation of everything she thought was secure. As Luna's illness worsened, Crystal's life became a constant race against time and exhaustion. The grueling routine of working 2 jobs was a necessary effort to cover her mother's expensive treatments. Every penny Crystal earned was carefully allocated to the medications Luna so desperately needed. The costs were exorbitant, but her love for her mother drove her forward. Working as a nurse at the hospital during the day and at night caring for a child in a private home felt like the only way to keep things afloat, even as the weight on her shoulders grew heavier with each passing day. Crystal was known for her tireless dedication. At the hospital, her colleagues admired her resilience and the way she never complained about the burden she carried. She treated every patient with a kind smile, even when exhaustion was evident in her eyes. When night fell, instead of going home to rest, she headed to her second job, where she cared for a sick little girl. Sleep was a rare luxury, but Crystal never showed weakness. In her heart, she had a greater mission: to ensure Luna had everything she needed, even if it meant sacrificing her own desires and dreams. Caring for 2 lives was an arduous task. Luna depended on Crystal for everything, from basic needs to the simplest tasks. Meanwhile, the little girl she cared for at night, Lily, was a sweet child with constant needs due to complications from her birth. For Crystal, caring for both wasn't just an obligation, it was an act of love. Even when physical and emotional exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, she pressed on, fueled by an inner strength she didn't even know she possessed. At the end of each day, whether sitting by her mother's side or at Lily's bedside, she felt a sense of purpose, knowing she was making a difference in their lives. The cost of all this, however, was steep. Crystal found herself increasingly consumed by the relentless pace her life had taken. The uncertainty of her mother's future and constant financial worries kept her awake during the few hours of sleep she managed to get. Noah's words, that life demanded sacrifices, echoed in her mind. But there were days when Crystal questioned how much longer she could endure. She was strong, but the fear of not being enough to protect those she loved haunted her. Even so, Crystal couldn't stop. The love she had for Luna and Lily kept her going, despite the difficulties and the toll her grueling life was taking. Long days and lonely nights became her new normal. Yet there was something more profound within her, a flame of courage that refused to go out. Unaware of what the future held, Crystal pressed on, determined to face whatever came her way. Crystal's life had become an endless cycle of caregiving. During the day, she dedicated herself to her patients at a Los Angeles hospital, where her talent as a nurse was admired by everyone. She moved with the precision of someone who had mastered her craft, always ready to act quickly and compassionately, whether in emergencies or the delicate routines of patient care. At the hospital, she earned the respect of the doctors and the affection of her patients, who could sense her genuine interest in their stories. Yet, even with all the appreciation she received, Crystal's mind was always divided. As soon as her shift ended, another challenge awaited her: the home of Jack and Emma, where an entirely different emotional battle unfolded each night. At her second job, Crystal faced a responsibility just as demanding: caring for Lily, Jack, and Emma's daughter. The sweet, A vulnerable little girl lived with the consequences of a traumatic birth and relied on someone who could provide her with gentle and patient care. Crystal quickly grew attached to Lily, who, despite her physical limitations, had a bright spirit and a curious mind. Each night spent with Lily was a blend of learning and giving, where Crystal applied all her knowledge of caring for fragile lives, both physically and emotionally. Lily's needs required constant attention, and Crystal was willing to give it, just as she did for her mother. The atmosphere in Jack and Emma's home was often tense. Emma, a bitter and distant woman, seemed trapped in an old sadness that shaped her every action. She rarely showed affection for her daughter, leaving most of Lily's care to Crystal. Jack, in contrast, was kind and deeply concerned about his daughter, always attentive to the family's needs. He admired Crystal's work, and over time, that admiration evolved into a deeper connection. Jack saw a light in Crystal that seemed absent in his own life, something that touched him more than he cared to admit. The routine at Jack and Emma's house was challenging, but Crystal approached it with the same determination that guided her work at the hospital. Each night, upon arriving at their home, she exchanged glances with Jack, who always greeted her with a grateful smile. Emma, on the other hand, barely concealed her discomfort with Crystal's presence. To her, the nurse represented something she couldn't be, someone capable of giving Lily the love and attention the girl so desperately needed. The tension in the air was palpable, and Crystal knew the situation between Jack and Emma was more complicated than it seemed. Despite it all, Crystal continued her journey, balancing the complexities of her work with the emotions surrounding the family. Her bond with Lily grew stronger each day, and the little girl began to trust Crystal in a way she had never trusted anyone before. But behind the nightly routines, emotions were simmering, and Crystal felt that something was about to change. The tension in the house was mounting, and she found herself in the midst of an emotional whirlwind she couldn't control. One evening, after a long day at the hospital, Crystal sat in the living room of Jack and Emma's house, taking a brief moment to rest while Lily slept in the room next door. Jack, having just returned from work, joined her as he did every night. But there was something different about that evening. Jack seemed more curious, more engaged in Crystal's words than usual. Perhaps it was the silence of the house or the way the soft light in the living room illuminated their tired faces. But for some reason, he decided to ask Crystal more about her life. It was rare for her to talk about herself, but that night the words flowed naturally. Crystal shared her story with Jack, telling him about her mother, Luna, and how the degenerative disease had made her completely dependent on Crystal's care. She spoke candidly about the weight she carried, but also about the love that motivated her to care for her mother. Each word painted a picture of her quiet struggles and her determination to honor those who had given her so much. Jack listened intently, feeling a mix of admiration and sadness. It was hard to imagine someone so young facing such challenges with such courage. He couldn't help but praise Crystal, not just for her dedication to her mother, but also for the care and love she showed Lily, which mirrored the devotion she gave at home. As Jack complimented her, Crystal felt a warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't often that anyone acknowledged her efforts. For her, caring for others was such a natural part of life that she rarely paused to consider the impact it had on those around her. But that night, Jack's words struck her differently. Perhaps it was the exhaustion or the fact that, for once, someone truly seemed to understand what she was going through. Her emotions were raw, and for a brief moment, Crystal allowed herself to feel the weight of her journey. Not everyone in the house, however, shared in that moment of connection. Emma, who had quietly entered the room unnoticed, overheard the conversation. Her heart, already heavy with resentment and insecurity, clenched even tighter as she listened to her husband praise Crystal. To Emma, those words felt like a blow, a confirmation of her deepest fears, that Crystal was filling a space in her life that she herself couldn't occupy. Jack never praised her like that, never showed the same warmth and admiration. And while she knew Crystal wasn't to blame, the bitterness within her only grew. From that night on, things began to change. Jack and Crystal were unaware, but Emma watched everything closely, every glance, every word exchanged. The tension, already present, now seemed ready to boil over, and Crystal found herself at the center of something far greater than she could have anticipated. What lay ahead was uncertain, but the consequences were beginning to unfold in ways none of them could have imagined. As the days passed, Jack struggled to hide his growing admiration for Crystal. Each time he saw her care for Lily with such patience and affection, he felt a stronger connection to her. It was impossible not to notice the almost superhuman dedication Crystal displayed, both at work and in her personal life. Jack admired not just her determination but also the quiet beauty she carried, a reflection of her kind and selfless soul. There was a light in Crystal that made him want to be near her, even if he didn't fully realize that his feelings were creating a new kind of tension in the air. Crystal, on the other hand, was unaware of the depth of Jack's feelings. To her, he was simply a concerned father who wanted the best for his daughter. The kindness he showed didn't strike her as having ulterior motives. Crystal viewed everything through a professional and altruistic lens, as she always did. However, as the days went on, Jack's extra attention became more apparent. He made an effort to talk with her more, to ask about her day, to learn more about her life outside of work. His interest extended beyond a professional relationship, and though Crystal didn't immediately notice, Emma certainly did. Lily, meanwhile, adored Crystal. The little girl felt a unique connection with her caregiver, one she didn't share with her own mother. The tenderness with which Crystal treated her was a source of comfort for Lily, who rarely received affection from Emma. To Lily, Crystal was more than a caregiver. She was a friend, someone she could trust completely. When Jack saw this bond between them, his heart warmed. Crystal brought life and joy to the household in a way no one else could, which drew Jack even closer to her, not only admiring her work but also the love Lily had for her. Over time, the atmosphere in the house began to shift subtly. Crystal's presence became increasingly essential, not just for Lily but also for Jack. He started confiding in her on a deeper level, seeking her advice, sharing his worries, and opening up about the struggles in his marriage. Emma, always observant, noticed every one of these interactions, and it filled her with a growing sense of betrayal, even though Jack had no intention of hurting her. Emma's bitterness grew, and the jealousy she felt toward Crystal became increasingly evident. Despite the emotional undercurrents swirling around her, Crystal remained steadfast in her mission. For her, caring for Lily was her priority, and her relationship with Jack, though close, was nothing more than a friendship born out of mutual respect. Crystal never allowed her feelings to interfere with her work, but the truth was that, slowly, the lines between her professional and personal life were beginning to blur. It was a shift that could lead to consequences she couldn't yet foresee. The tension in Jack and Emma's home grew more palpable by the day. For Emma, the growing affection Jack displayed toward Crystal was like a dagger to her heart. She saw how her husband's eyes lit up when he spoke to the nurse, how he seemed lighter and less burdened in her presence. It consumed her in ways she couldn't fully explain. Emma had always been a reserved woman, struggling to express emotions, especially toward her daughter, Lily. Now, she felt that Crystal was taking the place she had never been able to fill in both Jack and Lily's lives, a thought that left her bitter and resentful. Emma's jealousy began to manifest in visible ways. She distanced herself even further from Jack and Lily, creating an almost impenetrable emotional wall. Emma believed, in some way, that Crystal's presence in their lives was robbing her of something she could never get back. The bitterness she carried, born from years of pain and frustration, erupted in moments of subtle hostility. Whenever she saw Jack smile at Crystal or praise her work with Lily, the resentment inside her grew like a poison, further widening the gap between her and her husband. Emma carried a deep sense of guilt over her daughter's condition. Lily's complications were the result of a difficult birth, And ever since that day, Emma blamed Jack for not doing more, for not being able to prevent what had happened. She had never been able to properly express this pain, and over time, it eroded what little was left of her relationship with her husband. Every affectionate glance Jack directed at Crystal was, to Emma, a painful reminder of her own perceived failures, not just as a mother, but as a wife. She believed Jack silently blamed her for what had happened to Lily, and this belief deepened her bitterness and isolation. Crystal's presence in the house, rather than bringing relief, seemed to amplify Emma's feelings of inadequacy. She had never been able to care for Lily the way Crystal did, and this filled her with shame. The natural bond between Lily and Crystal was something Emma envied but didn't know how to foster herself. She felt like a stranger in her own home, watching from a distance as another woman took on the role she felt was rightfully hers. In her mind, Jack blamed her for everything, and now, with Crystal around, it felt as though she was being gradually, inevitably replaced. The relationship between Emma and Jack deteriorated more each day, with neither able to recognize how far apart they had grown. Emma, consumed by jealousy and guilt, couldn't see a way out of the situation she found herself in. Jack, on the other hand, continued to grow closer to Crystal, unaware of how much this was affecting his wife. The atmosphere in the house became increasingly unbearable, and a shift seemed imminent, ready to upend everything in ways they couldn't foresee. Despite his efforts to keep the family together, Jack struggled to understand Emma's growing bitterness. To him, the day of Lily's birth had been one of the most difficult of his life, and he had done everything he could to ensure both his wife and daughter made it through safely. However, the unforeseen complications left deep scars, not only on Lily but also on Emma, who never seemed to recover emotionally. Jack, who had always blamed himself for what happened, now found himself trapped in a cycle of bitterness he didn't know how to break. To Jack, Emma's coldness was a mystery. He couldn't understand why his wife seemed unable to forgive him or herself for the complications during Lily's birth. Over the years, he had tried countless times to reconnect with her, but his attempts were always met with silence or resentment. Their marriage, once built on love and partnership, had devolved into a distant coexistence where every glance exchanged was heavy with hurt and misunderstanding. Jack no longer knew how to reach his wife, and the frustration left him feeling lost and confused. In his heart, Jack believed he had done everything he could on that fateful day. He had been by Emma's side, holding her hand and doing his best to support her. But the events spiraled out of his control, and he had to accept that some things were beyond his power to change. Emma, however, never seemed to see it that way. In her eyes, Jack could have done more, could have prevented Lily's suffering. This chasm between their perspectives only widened the emotional distance between them. Crystal's arrival in their lives seemed to ease some of the pain Jack carried, but it simultaneously worsened the situation with Emma. Jack couldn't understand why Crystal's presence bothered his wife so much. To him, Crystal was simply a dedicated individual who made life a little easier amid their struggles. He admired her work with Lily, which only drew him closer to her. However, he failed to see how this closeness was affecting Emma, whose bitterness grew with every moment Jack emotionally distanced himself from her. Jack felt increasingly adrift in his marriage. He wanted to mend things with Emma, to understand her pain and ease her worries, but every attempt to reconnect seemed to increase the tension between them. The house was filled with uncomfortable silences, and Jack couldn't see a clear way forward. Meanwhile, Crystal's presence, with her warmth and kindness, seemed to be the only thing bringing a semblance of peace to the emotional chaos he lived in. Yet Jack had no idea that the tensions in his home were about to reach a breaking point. Crystal's constant presence in the house subtly shifted the family dynamic. The dark, tense energy that had previously dominated the atmosphere began to dissipate, and Jack couldn't help but notice how everything felt lighter. Crystal, with her unwavering determination and natural kindness, brought a renewed sense of life to their home. Even caring for Lily, once seen as an overwhelming burden, became a source of joy. Under Crystal's care, Lily blossomed. The little girl, who rarely smiled, now grinned more often, filling the house with an unexpected warmth. For Jack, Crystal's presence brought growing relief. The long, lonely nights spent wrestling with the challenges of caring for Lily and the constant silent arguments with Emma now felt less oppressive. With Crystal by his side, things seemed more manageable. She not only assisted with Lily's care, but also exuded a calming presence Jack didn't realize he needed. The daily routine, once suffocating, now became almost enjoyable, and Jack began to rediscover happiness in the small moments of everyday life. Even the more difficult moments with Lily, like managing her medical needs and mobility challenges, began to feel less burdensome. Crystal had a natural ability to make the heavy feel lighter. She spoke to Lily with a balance of gentleness and firmness, encouraging the girl to push beyond her limitations. Jack watched this with growing admiration, feeling increasingly drawn to Crystal's quiet strength. It was as if he had finally found someone who understood his struggles and was willing to face them alongside him. Emma, however, didn't share Jack's perception. To her, Crystal's presence wasn't a source of relief but a threat. Every time she saw the nurse interact with Jack or Lily, something inside her hardened even further. What felt like a rebirth for Jack felt like a loss of control for Emma, leaving her feeling increasingly out of place in her own home. Unbeknownst to Crystal, she had become the center of a silent conflict, a deep emotional battle between Jack and Emma that grew more intense with each passing day. Over time, the household that had once been filled with tension seemed, at least to Jack and Lily, a more cheerful place. Crystal had that effect on people, and Jack, though he had no intention of hurting Emma, found himself increasingly attached to this new dynamic. What he didn't yet fully understand was that this shift was planting the seeds of something larger, something that could not be contained for much longer. That night, everything seemed normal. Crystal was caring for Lily as usual when strange noises began to echo through the house. Accustomed to the usual quiet of the home, she felt a chill run down her spine. Within minutes, panic set in. The house was invaded by burglars, and everything unfolded too quickly for anyone to react. Ever protective, Crystal did her best to keep Lily calm, shielding her as much as possible while chaos erupted in the other rooms. The sense of vulnerability was overwhelming, but Crystal knew she had to stay composed for Lily's sake. The robbery was terrifying, but fortunately, no one was harmed. When the burglars left, leaving Jack and Emma's house in a state of disarray and fear, the police were immediately called. Jack was in shock, struggling to comprehend what had happened. But before he could process the events, Emma, still shaken by the invasion, turned to Crystal with eyes full of suspicion. Her accusation was brutal and unexpected. Emma believed Crystal had orchestrated the robbery. To Emma, the nurse's sudden closeness to the family and her presence during the crime seemed like undeniable evidence of her involvement. Crystal froze at the accusation. She had never imagined that someone could think such a thing of her, especially Emma, with whom she had always tried to maintain a professional and respectful relationship despite the tensions. The police, lacking concrete evidence but prompted by Emma's insistence, arrested Crystal to take her in for questioning. The moment Crystal was handcuffed in front of Lily and Jack was devastating. Lily, who saw Crystal as a second mother, cried inconsolably, while Jack tried, unsuccessfully, to defuse the situation. For Crystal, this was the beginning of a nightmare. Jack was torn between the shock of the robbery and disbelief that Emma could truly believe Crystal, who had cared for Lily with so much love and dedication, was capable of such betrayal. He didn't believe Crystal was guilty, but in that moment, the authority of the police and Emma's firm accusation took precedence. Crystal was taken to the station, and Jack, his heart heavy, promised himself he would do everything in his power to prove her innocence. However, the tensions within the household had reached a boiling point. As Crystal endured the humiliation of being accused of a crime she didn't commit, Jack felt his life teetering on the edge of collapse. The consequences of Emma's accusation wouldn't be easy to resolve, and the trust he thought he had in his own home was now shattered. He knew he had to fight for Crystal while grappling with a marriage that seemed more fragile than ever. Jack couldn't accept the idea that Crystal might be involved in the robbery. From the moment she was taken by the police, something inside him told him that Emma was making a grave mistake. Crystal was a woman of integrity who dedicated her life to caring for her ill mother and Lily with a tenderness that went beyond her professional obligations. Jack spent the night wide awake, reflecting on Emma's accusation and its repercussions for Crystal and the family. He understood that Emma's trust had been shaken, but what she had done crossed a line. By morning, Jack had made up his mind. He would withdraw the complaint, no matter how it affected his relationship with Emma. When Jack arrived at the station, he was met with skeptical looks. Retracting the accusation against Crystal wasn't a straightforward decision, and he knew it would infuriate Emma. However, his sense of justice overpowered his fears. He knew Crystal was innocent, and leaving her in jail for something she hadn't done was unthinkable. Speaking with the officer in charge, Jack explained his unwavering belief in Crystal's honesty and attributed Emma's accusation to her emotional distress. After several hours, the wheels of justice turned as expected, and Crystal was released. The news of Jack's decision to drop the charges against Crystal hit home like a bombshell. Emma, already consumed by jealousy and insecurity, saw this action as the ultimate betrayal by her husband. To her, Jack's choice to defend Crystal was akin to choosing Crystal over his own wife. The bitterness that had long resided within Emma now erupted into uncontrollable anger. She couldn't comprehend how Jack could trust Crystal more than her, and this realization deepened her sense of isolation in the marriage. Crystal, on the other hand, was grateful for Jack's trust in her innocence. Yet she understood that his decision would have devastating consequences for his relationship with Emma. She found herself in an increasingly uncomfortable position where her presence, rather than helping, seemed to be driving an even greater wedge between Jack and Emma. The weight of this realization began to press heavily on her shoulders. With Crystal back in the house, Lily couldn't have been happier. The little girl, who had endured days of anguish without her beloved caregiver, finally felt at peace again. However, the atmosphere in Jack and Emma's home was far from harmonious. The marriage, already crumbling, now teetered on the brink of collapse. While Jack tried to protect Crystal, he knew the tensions with Emma would only escalate. His decision to withdraw the accusation, though just, had planted the seed of an even greater conflict within the household. After the robbery and Jack's withdrawal of the complaint, Crystal made a difficult decision. She would no longer work at Emma's house. Though she adored Lily and knew how much the girl relied on her, the environment had become unbearable. The constant tension, Emma's resentment, and the baseless accusations made her realize that staying would only bring more suffering. Crystal needed peace, and remaining in such a toxic atmosphere would only harm her further. Deep down, she knew her absence would profoundly affect the family, especially Lily, who had formed a deep emotional bond with her. The days following Crystal's departure were difficult for everyone, but for Lily, they were devastating. The little girl, who had always felt safe and loved in Crystal's care, now faced an overwhelming loneliness. Her already fragile health began to visibly deteriorate. Lily cried often, refused to eat, and spent her days calling out for Crystal, her sadness breaking Jack's heart. He tried everything to fill the void Crystal had left, but he knew that no one could replace the special bond she had created with Lily. Emma, who initially felt relieved by Crystal's departure, soon began to understand the true impact of her absence. Watching her daughter decline in sadness was something Emma hadn't anticipated. She had always been distant from Lily, but seeing the girl's health worsen out of sheer heartbreak awakened something within her. Emma knew, even if she didn't want to admit it, that she had made a terrible mistake by accusing Crystal. The nurse was the only person who could truly reach Lily, and without her, the household was unraveling. Lily's pain touched Emma in a way she wasn't prepared to handle. Forced by the circumstances and the weight of her own guilt, Emma finally relented. She knew she had to swallow her pride and apologize to Crystal. It was the only way to restore peace to the household and, most importantly, help Lily recover. Emma, who had always been proud and resistant, confronted her demons and sought out Crystal. She offered a heartfelt apology, admitting that she had acted out of jealousy and insecurity. With tears in her eyes, Emma begged Crystal to return, not for her sake, but for Lily, who desperately needed her presence. Crystal, surprised by Emma's apology, remained silent for a moment, considering what it meant. She knew Emma wasn't an easy person, but seeing Lily's mother humble herself in this way showed Crystal that reconciliation might be possible. Her love for Lily had always been greater than any resentment, and after some reflection, Crystal agreed to return. It wouldn't be easy, but she knew Lily deserved all the care and love she could give. Amid the emotional turmoil in the household, Jack faced another unexpected blow. He lost his job at the textile company where he had worked for years. The company, struggling financially, had to cut costs, and despite Jack's dedication, he was let go. The news came as a shock, shaking Jack to his core. He knew his family depended on his income, and losing their financial security during such a delicate time only compounded the existing tensions. Now, in addition to dealing with his strained relationship with Emma, Jack had to face the harsh reality of being unable to provide for his household as he once had. One of Jack's greatest worries after losing his job was how to continue paying Crystal's salary. He knew she deserved fair compensation for the exceptional care she provided, but his new financial situation made this impossible. In a candid conversation, Jack explained the situation to Crystal, expressing his regret for not being able to pay her what she deserved. He was devastated, fearing that without the ability to offer her the same salary, Crystal might decide to leave Lily's care permanently. Crystal's response, however, took Jack by surprise. For her, money had never been the primary motivation for working in their home. Her bond with Lily was deep and genuine. The little girl had become a part of her life, and Crystal knew that Lily depended on her presence as much as she relied on the relationship for her own sense of fulfillment. With quiet resolve, Crystal looked at Jack and assured him that she would continue caring for Lily, regardless of the reduced salary. Her words brought Jack immediate relief, but he also recognized the added burden this decision placed on Crystal. The days that followed were challenging but marked by a newfound camaraderie between Jack and Crystal. He deeply appreciated her sacrifice and felt immense gratitude for her generosity. Crystal, in turn, found strength in her relationship with Lily. Gradually, the little girl began to regain the joy she had lost during Crystal's absence. Their bond grew even stronger, and Crystal knew that despite the financial difficulties, she was exactly where she needed to be. Their connection was built on love, and that was worth more than any paycheck. While Emma was aware of Jack's precarious financial situation, she remained silent. Her pride kept her from expressing any gratitude toward Crystal for choosing to stay. However, deep down, Emma knew that without Crystal, life in the household would have become unbearable. She still struggled to fully reconcile her feelings about the nurse, but her perspective had shifted. Crystal's presence was indispensable, not just for Lily's emotional well-being, but for the survival of their family as a whole. The relationship between Jack and Crystal, already close and built on trust, began to take on deeper dimensions over time. Jack, who had always admired Crystal's dedication and kindness, started to see her differently. It wasn't just gratitude for what she did for Lily. It was a genuine affection that grew stronger with each passing day. Jack found his thoughts drifting to Crystal often, even when she wasn't around. What had started as simple admiration had transformed into something much deeper, something he could no longer ignore. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Jack finally decided to express his feelings. Crystal was in the kitchen, organizing Lily's medications. When Jack entered, visibly nervous. He hesitated for a moment but knew he had to be honest. With his heart on his sleeve, Jack confessed his feelings to Crystal. He told her he was in love with her, that he had never met someone as kind and strong as she was. He admitted that his marriage with Emma had been strained for a long time and that, if necessary, he was willing to divorce to be with Crystal. His words were heavy with emotion, and the silence that followed was palpable. Crystal, taken aback by Jack's declaration, felt her heart race. She hadn't expected this from him, and though she cared deeply for Jack, she knew her feelings couldn't extend beyond the bond they already shared. With kindness, she explained to Jack that her life was entirely devoted to her mother. Luna, growing more fragile by the day, relied completely on her care, and Crystal knew she couldn't open her heart to a new relationship at this point in her life. She loved her mother above all else, and taking care of Luna was her top priority. Crystal also recognized that her affection for Jack, though genuine, wasn't strong enough to warrant such a monumental decision as entering into a romantic relationship with him. Jack, though disappointed, understood Crystal's decision. He knew how much Luna meant to her and respected her choice to prioritize her mother. Crystal's maturity and sense of responsibility only deepened Jack's admiration for her. He didn't insist or pressure her. Instead, he accepted her decision with dignity, knowing that their relationship, while not what he had hoped for, was still rooted in deep friendship and mutual respect. Their connection remained unbroken, but it was clear that Jack's path would take a different direction than he had envisioned. After that conversation, the atmosphere between Jack and Crystal returned to one of mutual respect and understanding. There were no lingering resentments, only the acceptance that not everything can be controlled, and that sometimes love must wait or take on a different form. Crystal continued to care for Lily with the same unwavering devotion, and Jack, though his heart ached, respected her choice and focused on his family, working to rebuild his life without adding further complications. Life moved forward, and they both knew the decisions they had made were the right ones for the time being. Following a period of financial uncertainty, Jack finally secured a new job. The company was well regarded in its industry, and its owner, Diana, was known for her determination and high standards. Jack joined the team with a mix of excitement and determination, eager to restart his professional life and provide stability for his family once more. From the outset, Diana noticed that Jack was not only competent and dedicated but also carried himself with a serious yet engaging demeanor. His presence commanded attention, but it was his intelligence and commitment to his work that truly impressed her. Diana, accustomed to dealing with all types of business professionals, was struck by Jack's efficiency and natural leadership skills from day one. He wasn't just another employee. He stood out with his ability to solve problems and maintain composure, even in the most challenging situations. For a woman who was used to being in control, Diana began to see Jack as more than just a valuable asset. She saw him as someone with the potential to become indispensable to the company. She praised his performance whenever possible, and while Jack felt honored, he worked hard to stay focused and not let the unexpected attention distract him. However, the professional relationship between Jack and Diana began to take on a more personal dynamic than Jack had anticipated. Diana, in addition to being a successful businesswoman, was strikingly attractive, and her beauty didn't go unnoticed. Although Jack wasn't seeking any kind of involvement outside of work, he couldn't ignore the subtle ways Diana seemed to draw closer to him, showing an interest that went beyond the professional. Her compliments extended beyond his work ethic, and while Jack was flattered, he maintained a firm boundary, constantly reminding himself of his personal circumstances and the responsibilities he still carried. Diana, on the other hand, was not someone who gave up easily. She admired Jack for his integrity and work ethic, but she also began to feel a growing personal attraction to him. During business meetings and daily interactions, she found herself paying more attention to Jack than to anyone else. To Diana, Jack represented a mix of challenge and admiration. He wasn't like the other men who tried to impress her. There was something about his reserved and honest demeanor that drew her in. Despite noticing Diana's interest, Jack remained steadfast. He knew that any involvement with his boss could lead to unwanted complications, especially given the emotional turmoil he was already navigating in his personal life. Jack's life was slowly stabilizing, but he understood the need to tread carefully with his decisions, particularly those involving someone in a position of power. Meanwhile, Diana had an ongoing but discreet relationship with her assistant, Antony. Few people within the company were aware of their personal connection, as Diana worked hard to maintain a professional and distant image. Antony, however, was far more emotionally invested than Diana ever let on. He was intelligent and ambitious, but his affection for Diana left him vulnerable. When Jack was hired and began to receive special attention from Diana, Antony immediately noticed, and jealousy began to simmer within him. At first, Antony tried to ignore Diana's frequent compliments toward Jack. After all, he knew Jack was a capable professional who deserved recognition for his work. But as time went on, Antony realized Diana's admiration for Jack extended beyond the professional. Their conversations became more frequent, her praises more effusive, and Diana seemed increasingly drawn to Jack's presence. This triggered a wave of insecurity in Antony, who feared that Jack was starting to take a place he had always believed was his. Antony's jealousy intensified daily. He could no longer hide his frustration, and small signs of irritation began to surface in his behavior. During meetings with Diana, he found himself interrupting whenever Jack was mentioned or downplaying the new hire's accomplishments. Diana, however, appeared oblivious to Antony's shifting demeanor, as her focus remained almost entirely on Jack, further exacerbating Antony's discomfort. For Antony, who had always thought he held a privileged position with Diana, Jack's arrival felt like a threat to both his professional standing and the personal connection he cherished. Diana, for her part, wasn't blind to Antony's jealousy. She understood that their relationship was complicated, and that her growing closeness with Jack was stirring conflicted emotions in Antony. However, she chose to downplay its significance. Diana was a pragmatic and determined woman, and for her, efficiency and results at work always came first. While she acknowledged her relationship with Antony, her interest in Jack continued to grow, and she saw no reason to halt the connection she was forming with him. Antony, however, saw things very differently. The tension between Antony and Jack grew silently but noticeably. Jack, always professional, had no idea about the relationship between Antony and Diana, and to him, Antony's behavior was merely a matter of workplace rivalry. However, Antony's jealousy was on the verge of becoming something far more dangerous. His insecurities were about to dictate his actions, placing everyone in a much more complicated and perilous situation. As the days went by, the closeness between Diana and Jack only intensified. Diana, increasingly captivated by Jack's demeanor, began to express her personal interest in a more overt manner. She no longer hid her intentions, ensuring she was by his side whenever possible, whether to discuss company matters or simply to engage in personal conversations. Diana was a determined woman, accustomed to getting what she wanted, and at this moment what she wanted was Jack. The idea of a relationship with him felt irresistible, and her admiration for him became more evident with each passing day. Jack, however, though he felt some attraction toward Diana, held his ground firmly. He knew his personal life was in a delicate state, and despite his marriage to Emma being on the brink of collapse, he wasn't ready to cross that line. Jack's strong sense of morality and the commitment he had once made to his wife still guided him. Diana's advances made him increasingly uncomfortable, especially because he knew that any involvement could further complicate his already tumultuous life. With as much kindness as he could muster, Jack turned Diana down. For Diana, Jack's resistance was a challenge. Used to being in control, she couldn't understand why Jack, a man clearly unhappy in his marriage, wasn't willing to pursue something new with her. Diana was beautiful, powerful, and offered Jack a path filled with possibilities. To her, Jack's relationship with Emma was a sinking ship, something he should abandon. Yet despite her efforts, Jack stood firm, maintaining an emotional barrier that deeply frustrated her. Diana wasn't accustomed to hearing no, and this only fueled her desire further. Jack, on the other hand, knew the situation with Diana was becoming untenable. He respected her as a businesswoman and appreciated the opportunity she had given him. But the emotional tension between them was growing more palpable by the day. Jack didn't want to jeopardize his job, but he also wasn't willing to compromise his values or further entangle his already complicated personal life. He continued to refuse Diana's advances gently but firmly, making it clear that, despite the temptation, he was still a married man and wouldn't act impulsively. This refusal, however, began to shake Diana. She wasn't the type to give up easily, but Jack's resistance was testing her limits. While she tried to maintain her composure at work, the constant rejection stirred conflicting emotions within her. Her desire for Jack, combined with her frustration at not getting what she wanted, was about to lead to consequences neither of them could have anticipated. Meanwhile, Anthony, who had always been Diana's right-hand man, now found himself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. Each day, the closeness between Diana and Jack became more apparent, and Anthony's jealousy grew uncontrollably. He knew Diana well enough to recognize that her interest in Jack wasn't merely professional, and this realization filled him with insecurity. Anthony, who had long believed he held a special place in Diana's life, now felt his world crumbling. The attention she once gave him was now entirely focused on Jack, and Anthony's frustration was morphing into something dangerous. The jealousy consuming Anthony began to take a darker turn. Convinced that Jack was a threat to both his relationship with Diana and his standing at the company, Anthony started to harbor a silent hatred for him. His anger was matched only by the pain of watching Diana grow closer to Jack with an ease that made Anthony feel invisible. Always a calculating man, Anthony began to contemplate ways to eliminate Jack from his life entirely. In his mind, the only solution was to remove Jack permanently. Fueled by this dangerous idea, Anthony began planning an attack against Jack. He knew he couldn't act rashly, so he spent weeks devising a way to execute his plan without arousing suspicion. His mind, once focused on business, was now consumed with the obsession of destroying Jack. Anthony couldn't think of anything else. He was determined to ensure Jack disappeared without a trace. For Anthony, this wasn't just about revenge, it was about emotional survival. He was willing to do whatever it took to reclaim control of his life and Diana's attention. Anthony began putting his plan into action, seeking out someone who could do the dirty work for him while keeping his own involvement hidden. He knew he couldn't risk being directly linked to the crime, so he moved discreetly, finding contacts who could help him carry out his plan. To Anthony, this wasn't just retaliation, it was a necessary act to restore his life to what it once was. Nothing, he believed, could stand in his way. Meanwhile, Jack continued with his life, unaware of the looming danger. He remained focused on rebuilding his financial and emotional stability, still striving to keep his distance from Diana. However, Anthony's threat hovered over him, and the steps Anthony was taking would soon lead to consequences that would change everything. Determined to execute his plan, Anthony found someone willing to do the dirty work. With cold calculation, he hired a man who asked no questions and simply followed orders. The plan was simple yet lethal. Tamper with the brakes on Jack's car, ensuring that an accident was inevitable. For Anthony, this was the final solution, the moment he would reclaim his life and, most importantly, Diana. The thought of removing Jack from the equation brought Anthony a sense of relief and control he hadn't felt in a long time. The day arrived, and the man hired by Anthony carried out the sabotage without arousing suspicion. Jack's car, parked as usual at the company, had its brakes tampered with. Everything was set so that, at the end of the workday, Jack would unknowingly drive off toward what Anthony envisioned as his end. In his twisted mind, Anthony already pictured the news of the accident, and the inevitable absence of Jack from Diana's life and the company. He believed that, with Jack out of the picture, everything would return to normal, or at least to his version of normal. But something unexpected happened that day. Emma, who rarely visited Jack at work, decided to stop by after his shift. Despite their recent conflicts, she wanted to talk, perhaps in a last-ditch effort to salvage what remained of their marriage. Emma, who had avoided Jack and his work routine for so long, made a sudden decision to meet him that day. When she arrived, Jack was already preparing to leave, and together, they decided to drive home in the same car, just as they used to in the early years of their marriage. Little did Emma know that this gesture would completely alter the course of her life. Jack, surprised but cautiously hopeful, felt a glimmer of optimism upon seeing Emma waiting for him. Despite knowing their marriage was in crisis, her willingness to ride home with him gave him a fleeting sense of relief. Perhaps there was a chance for reconciliation, a moment to finally talk about everything that had gone wrong. Jack suspected nothing, not the danger that awaited them on the road, nor the deadly scheme that had been set in motion. To him, everything seemed normal, but fate was about to show its cruel hand. The drive home began uneventfully but quickly turned into a nightmare. Jack noticed something was wrong with the brakes, and the situation spiraled out of control. The car, unable to slow down, veered wildly on the road. The crash was inevitable. When emergency services arrived, the scene was devastating. Only Jack survived. Emma lost her life at the scene. Anthony's plan, which had targeted Jack, instead claimed Emma's life in a tragic and unforeseen outcome. Emma's death in the accident devastated Jack in unimaginable ways. The pain of losing his wife, despite all the challenges in their marriage, was unbearable. He had never wished for their relationship to end this way. Yet the nightmare was only beginning. Following the accident, authorities began investigating what could have caused the brake failure, and suspicion of sabotage quickly arose. In a cruel twist of fate, Jack became the prime suspect. To the police, the incident appeared premeditated, a deliberate attempt to end a failing marriage by eliminating Emma. Jack's arrest shocked everyone around him. Immersed in grief, he could barely comprehend the turn of events. Being accused of orchestrating Emma's death shattered any semblance of emotional stability he had left. Jack, who had always prided himself on his integrity, now found himself in a cell, interrogated for a crime he never imagined committing. The reality of his situation felt like an unending nightmare. The man he thought he was, a loving father and dedicated professional, was now being treated as a criminal. As Jack grappled with the enormity of the accusations, evidence against him began to mount. Witnesses spoke of the tension between him and Emma, and their troubled marriage was cited as a motive. Investigators uncovered notes and messages which, taken out of context, seemed to support the theory of a premeditated plan. The media, eager for scandal, painted Jack as a man who, after years of unhappiness, decided to end his wife's life. Already overwhelmed by Emma's death, Jack now had to fight to prove his innocence. What no one knew was that Anthony was behind it all. The true mastermind of the sabotage watched Jack's arrest from a distance, initially feeling triumphant. For Anthony, Jack's incarceration was the culmination of his perfect plan. He believed that, with Jack out of the way, Diana would be free of his influence, and Anthony could reclaim his place by her side. But Anthony hadn't anticipated the repercussions that were about to unfold. What seemed like an infallible plan would soon unravel, and the hidden truths about the accident would come to light. While Jack faced the darkest moment of his life, Crystal, who had always believed in his integrity, couldn't accept that he was guilty. Something inside her told her there was more to the story than met the eye. Determined to uncover the truth, Crystal resolved to act, driven by her conviction to prove Jack's innocence and expose the real culprit behind the tragedy that had shattered so many lives. Crystal knew time was working against her. Jack was already being treated as guilty by everyone around him, but she refused to believe he could be capable of such a heinous act. Convinced there was something deeply flawed in the accusations, she sought help. That's when she thought of Charles, a longtime family friend and now a renowned attorney. Crystal knew that if anyone could find the flaws in the case and clear Jack's name, it was Charles. Upon hearing about the situation, Charles immediately agreed to take on the case. He had known Jack for years and also couldn't believe his friend would be involved in such a crime. With his legal expertise, Charles began examining the evidence presented by the prosecution and quickly identified numerous inconsistencies. Together, he and Crystal formed a team, determined to investigate every detail of the accident and uncover who was truly responsible for the brake's sabotage. It wouldn't be easy, but they were both prepared to go to any lengths to exonerate Jack. As the investigation progressed, critical clues began to emerge. Charles gained access to testimony that revealed flaws in the police's initial assumptions and soon uncovered a crucial connection: the link between Anthony and the man hired to sabotage the car. A trail of messages and financial transactions began to paint a much clearer picture. Anthony, driven by jealousy and his desire to eliminate Jack, had orchestrated the entire plan. When Crystal heard the details, she was shaken but also relieved to finally have the thread that could set Jack free. With this new evidence in hand, Charles acted swiftly to reopen the case and have the charges against Jack dropped. During a tense hearing, the evidence was presented, and the true culprit was revealed. Anthony, realizing his plan had been uncovered, tried to flee but was apprehended before he could get far. His arrest brought a wave of relief for Crystal and Jack, who was finally freed from jail. Although the pain of losing Emma still lingered, justice was beginning to be served, and Jack, now a free man, could start rebuilding his life. Crystal, who had dedicated herself entirely to uncovering the truth, felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion seeing Jack free again. She knew the road ahead would still be challenging, especially with Lily and the trauma she had endured, but the most important thing at that moment was that the truth had prevailed. Jack, deeply grateful to both Crystal and Charles, understood there were still many wounds to heal. However, with Anthony imprisoned and justice served, he could finally begin to look to the future with a glimmer of hope. After the chaos caused by Anthony's arrest and Jack's release, the question of Lily's future became the central concern for both Jack and Crystal. Emma's death had left a profound void in the little girl's life, and Jack, still focused on rebuilding his own, knew Lily needed emotional stability and care that he wasn't fully capable of providing at the time. It was then that Emma's parents, Lily's maternal grandparents, offered to take her in. They had always maintained a close relationship with Lily and, despite their devastation over losing their daughter, were willing to take on the responsibility of raising their granddaughter. Lily, already accustomed to Crystal's constant presence, was initially apprehensive about moving in with her grandparents. She felt safe with Crystal, and the idea of moving to her grandparents' home, though familiar, brought a new kind of fear and uncertainty. Recognizing the strong bond between his daughter and Crystal, Jack made an important decision. Though Lily would move in with her grandparents, Crystal would remain her caregiver. It was the only way to ensure Lily continued to receive the love and care of someone she deeply trusted. Under this new arrangement, Crystal split her time between the home of Emma's parents and her work as a nurse at the hospital. Lily's grandparents were grateful for Crystal's willingness to remain in their granddaughter's life, understanding how vital she was to the girl's emotional well-being. For Crystal, taking on this new role was a decision she embraced with a full heart. Despite the many changes and challenges, she knew her presence was crucial to helping Lily navigate her grief and adapt to her new reality. Crystal's routine with Lily remained nearly the same, the only difference being the new setting. Afternoons were filled with activities aimed at helping Lily express her emotions, and Crystal ensured she was there for every small yet significant moment. Gradually, Lily began to adjust to her new home, feeling safe knowing Crystal was still by her side, providing the same love and dedication as before. Lily's grandparents also made every effort to support the transition, acknowledging that Crystal was an indispensable figure in their granddaughter's emotional stability. Over time, the new family dynamic began to settle into a smoother rhythm. Surrounded by the love of her grandparents and the constant attention of Crystal, Lily started to regain her joy, even amidst the painful memories of her mother's loss. For Crystal, taking care of Lily had become more than just a job. It was a way to fill her own life with purpose and love while helping the little girl face her fears and insecurities. Together, they continued on a path of healing and hope. Meanwhile, Luna's health, already in a delicate state, began to deteriorate rapidly. Crystal, ever vigilant and devoted, closely monitored every stage of her mother's decline, though she knew the end was near. One day, Luna was admitted to the hospital in critical condition. Lying in her bed, she understood that her time was running out. Crystal sat by her side, gripping her hand tightly as if that simple gesture could hold back the inevitable. Luna's frailty was unmistakable, yet even in her final moments, she seemed to carry a burden she needed to share with Crystal before departing. In a moment of clarity, Luna looked at Crystal with an expression that was both grave and deeply emotional. With a weak but steady voice, she revealed the secret she had held onto for so long. "Crystal, you are not my biological daughter," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. Crystal, stunned, felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "What do you mean?" she asked automatically, her mind unable to fully grasp what she was hearing. Luna, struggling to continue, explained that Crystal had been adopted as a baby. The revelation shattered Crystal's understanding of her entire life. Crystal's confusion was evident. She had always believed Luna to be her true mother, and now, at her mother's deathbed, she was learning that her entire existence had been built on a secret. But Luna wasn't finished. With tears streaming down her face, she shared an even more shocking truth. "You have a sister. She's a little older than you." Crystal, still reeling, couldn't process all the information at once. Her mind raced with questions, but Luna was too weak to answer them all. In her fragile state, Luna mustered the strength to explain as much as she could. She recounted how Crystal's biological mother, a woman named Mila Brandon, had died sick and unable to care for her daughters. Crystal, the youngest, had been adopted by Luna and Noah, while her older sister was taken in by another family. The exact circumstances remained unclear, but Luna did her best to relay what she knew before her body succumbed to exhaustion. She pleaded with Crystal to find her sister and not let this secret remain buried. Crystal, still holding her mother's hand, could barely breathe. The revelation was overwhelming, yet it came with a sense of urgency and purpose. She had to discover who her sister was and uncover more about her origins. Though emotionally shattered, Crystal knew that her immediate priority was to stay by Luna's side, to comfort her through her final moments with the love they had always shared. But deep in her mind, one question echoed relentlessly. Who was her true family, and what would this revelation mean for her future? As Luna struggled for breath, her weakened voice continued to reveal truths that left Crystal stunned. With great effort, she recounted the story of Mila Brandon, Crystal's biological mother. Mila had endured a life of extreme poverty and hardship. Sick and without resources, Mila had been unable to care for her two daughters. Realizing her time was running out, she made the heart-wrenching decision to place them for adoption. Crystal, then just a baby, was adopted by Luna and Noah, while her older sister, 2 years her senior, was taken in by another family. After that, they never heard from her again. Luna's words carried a heavy mix of emotion and sorrow, but also an urgent need to give Crystal this final piece of the puzzle. The knowledge that her biological mother had died alone and destitute shook Crystal to her core. Though she had no memory of Mila, the thought that her life had begun amidst such suffering left an indelible mark on her soul. Learning that she had been separated from a sister she had never known added a new layer of anguish. Through her tears, Crystal clutched Luna's hand more tightly, feeling a blend of gratitude and sorrow for finally being given the truth. Luna, visibly drained after her long confession, knew her time was running out. She gazed at Crystal, her eyes reflecting both love and regret. Luna had always loved Crystal as her own daughter, but she understood that keeping this secret for so long had created a chasm between the truth and the life they had built together. In her final moments, Luna hoped Crystal would understand that, despite not being her biological mother, she had loved her with all her heart. Now, all Luna wanted was for Crystal to find her sister, wherever she might be, and uncover a connection that had been lost for so long. The atmosphere in the hospital room was heavy with the weight of impending loss. The rhythmic beeping of the machines monitoring Luna's heart was the only sound breaking the silence as Crystal tried to process everything she had learned. Her eyes remained fixed on the woman who had raised her, the mother who, despite not giving birth to her, had given her everything. Luna, in her final act of love, had unearthed painful yet necessary truths that Crystal would now have to face alone. The weight of this new reality pressed heavily on her chest, but she knew she had to find the strength to move forward. With her final breath, Luna left the world, and Crystal felt as though a part of herself had gone with her. The emptiness that followed was overwhelming. She hadn't just lost the mother who had raised her. She now faced a daunting journey to uncover the truth about a family she had never known. What lay ahead was uncertain, but the promise she had made to Luna to find her sister echoed in her mind, guiding her next steps. The revelation about her true origins had shaken Crystal to her very core, but it also ignited a renewed sense of purpose. Luna's death left a gaping void in her life, but it also gave her a mission she couldn't ignore. More than ever, Crystal felt compelled to discover who her sister was. The weight of the secret that had finally been unveiled didn't allow her to simply carry on as though nothing had changed. She knew another chapter of her story was waiting to be uncovered, and she was determined to find the answers. The first step for Crystal was to learn more about her biological mother, Mila Brandon. While Luna had shared what she knew, many questions remained unanswered. Crystal needed to uncover more about the woman who brought her into the world and understand why Mila made the heart-wrenching decision to separate her from her sister. These questions haunted her day and night as she began to map out a plan to unravel the mystery. Her mission was clear: find clues about her sister's whereabouts and, if possible, rebuild the bond that had been severed in childhood. Crystal knew this search wouldn't be easy. Years had passed, and information about her older sister might have been lost or difficult to trace. Yet she was determined. She began considering all her options: hiring a private investigator, searching through adoption records, or even reaching out to distant relatives who might have some information. A woman of strength and practicality, Crystal channeled these qualities into her newfound mission. Her love for her family, both the one that raised her and the one she barely knew, drove her forward. As Crystal planned her next steps, her anxiety also grew. She understood that pursuing this path might lead not only to answers but also to new wounds. What if her sister didn't want to meet her? What if the truths she sought turned out to be more painful than the secret Luna had revealed? Despite these uncertainties, Crystal knew she had to press on. The promise she had made to her mother in her final moments was not just a matter of honor but a way to find herself. Crystal began gathering every piece of information she could, meticulously following every lead. She knew this would be a long and emotionally taxing process, but above all, it was a journey of self-discovery. Finding her sister wasn't just about solving the mystery of her past. It was also a chance to fill the growing void inside her since learning the truth. Crystal's destiny was now intertwined with that of a sister she had never known, but who already held a significant place in her heart. Meanwhile, after the tumultuous journeys they had both endured, something began to shift between Jack and Crystal. The friendship and mutual respect they had always shared deepened into something more profound. Now, with her responsibility of caring for Luna behind her and her life gradually stabilizing, Crystal allowed herself to feel something she had long avoided: love. She knew Jack had always had a special affection for her, but until now, the circumstances hadn't allowed anything more to develop. With life finally offering a bit of peace, Crystal began to see Jack in a new light. Jack, for his part, had also undergone significant transformations. The pain of losing Emma and the challenges of raising Lily had shaped him into an even stronger, more resilient man. He had always known he had feelings for Crystal, but had respected her space and priorities. Now, seeing her emotionally freer and more available, Jack decided it was time to express his feelings. In a moment of heartfelt simplicity, he asked Crystal to start a relationship with him. There were no grand declarations or extravagant gestures, just the honest truth of a man who admired her deeply. Touched by Jack's sincerity, Crystal felt her heart open. For so long, she had focused on her responsibilities, particularly in caring for Luna. Now, with her mother gone, Crystal realized there was room for something new in her life. She accepted Jack's proposal, not only because of the affection he had always shown her, but also because, through all their shared pain and challenges, she had come to love the man he had become. Simple, honest, and family-oriented, these were the values Crystal admired in Jack, and that made her ready to embrace this new chapter alongside him. Their relationship, though new, was built on a solid foundation of trust, respect, and love. Both had endured hardships, which only deepened their bond. For Crystal, her journey with Jack represented not just a fresh start, but also the opportunity to find happiness with someone who understood her struggles and had shared in her pain. Jack, in turn, felt he had finally found someone who completed him, a strong, compassionate, and loyal partner who had stood by him during his darkest moments. As they began building a life together, Jack and Crystal approached the future with renewed hope and love as their guiding force. The scars of the past remained, but they were now part of a shared story they were ready to face together. What once seemed uncertain now appeared full of promise and possibility. The news of Jack and Crystal's relationship reached Diana like a cold blade piercing her pride. From the beginning, Diana had always believed that if Jack chose to move on, it would be with her. After all, she was the powerful boss, the woman who had provided him with professional opportunities and made her interest in him clear. Learning that Jack had chosen Crystal instead of her was a harsh blow. Diana couldn't accept that, after all the attention and closeness she had offered, Jack had chosen someone as ordinary as Crystal, a simple nurse who, in Diana's eyes, couldn't possibly compete with her power and status. Diana's anger grew by the day. She couldn't bear the thought of Jack being happy with Crystal, which drove her to increasingly obsessive behavior. Determined to show Jack that he had made a mistake, Diana began scheming ways to tarnish Crystal's reputation. She used her influence and connections to dig into Crystal's past, searching for anything she could use against her. Diana's obsession with finding something incriminating was so intense that she started neglecting her own business, focusing solely on destroying Jack and Crystal's relationship. However, the more Diana searched, the less she found. Crystal, who had always lived an honest and dedicated life, had no dark secrets or past mistakes for Diana to exploit. This only fueled Diana's frustration further. She refused to believe that someone like Crystal could appear so perfect in Jack's eyes. Each failure to uncover something damaging only deepened her anger, and Diana became more determined than ever to unmask the woman she saw as her rival. Despite her failure to find anything concrete, Diana refused to give up. She began orchestrating situations to tarnish Crystal's image. She planted rumors, spread subtle lies among social circles, and made insinuations to Crystal's colleagues. However, at the hospital where Crystal worked, everyone knew her too well to believe such stories. Crystal's dedication and ethics were beyond question, and Diana's attempts were dismissed as baseless attacks, further isolating the businesswoman. Yet for Diana, admitting defeat was not an option. Diana found herself increasingly trapped in her own obsession. The image of Jack and Crystal happily together consumed her thoughts, pushing her toward increasingly irrational behavior. But no matter what she tried, she couldn't find anything to shake Crystal's standing in Jack's eyes. The love they shared was rooted in something far stronger than any rumor or lie Diana could concoct. And despite her resistance, Diana began to sense she was fighting a battle she couldn't win. In her growing desperation to ruin Crystal, Diana devised a more aggressive plan. Frustrated at her inability to unearth anything from Crystal's past, she decided to target her professionally, hoping to damage Crystal's reputation as a nurse. Diana knew that Crystal's work was her pride and identity. If she could tarnish this part of her life, perhaps she could shake her image in Jack's eyes and among her colleagues. Diana boldly visited the hospital where Crystal worked, a move that showcased how much her obsession had taken over her actions. She approached a young nurse who had recently joined the staff, believing her to be the perfect target for manipulation. Using her charm and offering a tempting sum of money, Diana attempted to convince the nurse to commit a deliberate medical error, administering the wrong medication to a patient and then framing Crystal for the mistake. Diana assured her that no one would ever discover the truth. However, Diana underestimated the integrity of the hospital environment and, more importantly, the unwavering respect Crystal had earned. The young nurse, though new, was well aware of Crystal's exemplary professionalism and unwavering dedication to her patients. Shocked and appalled by Diana's proposal, she immediately refused, asserting that she would never participate in something so dishonest. She added that Crystal was one of the most respected and trusted nurses on the team, making any attempt to undermine her reputation futile. Diana's rejection by the young nurse was another blow to her crumbling plan. She couldn't comprehend how someone as ordinary as Crystal could command such respect and loyalty from those around her. Diana's frustration grew, but she was now finding herself more isolated than ever. The hospital, where Crystal's reputation was untouchable, was clearly not a place where Diana could succeed in her schemes. Without allies to help execute her plans, Diana began to realize she was running out of options. The young nurse, outraged by Diana's proposal, shared the incident with other staff members. The story spread quickly, and Diana's desperate attempt to harm Crystal only highlighted her own desperation. In the end, her strategy backfired, further solidifying Crystal's image as a professional of impeccable character while exposing Diana's underhanded tactics. Though her plan had failed, Diana wasn't ready to give up entirely, but the futility of her efforts was becoming increasingly evident. Time moved forward, and the long-awaited day finally arrived. Crystal and Jack were married. The ceremony was simple, surrounded by close friends and family, exactly as the couple had envisioned. For Crystal, the moment symbolized not just the beginning of a new chapter with Jack, but also the triumph over all the challenges they had faced together. She knew that life with Jack would be filled with love, as well as the commitment to caring for Lily, something Crystal had always embraced with the utmost devotion. Together, they formed a family not perfect, but deeply bound by love and dedication. Despite all the turbulence of the past, Crystal made an unexpected decision. She invited Diana to visit the home she now shared with Jack. It was an olive branch, a gesture of peace to show there were no lingering hard feelings despite everything that had transpired. Diana, surprised by the invitation, accepted, unsure of what to expect. Her emotions toward Crystal remained complicated, but she decided to see for herself what life was like for the woman she had long considered her rival. When Diana arrived at Jack and Crystal's home, she was greeted with cordiality. But what struck her most was the reality of their domestic life. She had imagined an idyllic, picture-perfect existence, but the reality was far from her expectations. Life with Jack and Crystal was filled with responsibilities. Caring for Lily demanded immense time and effort, something Diana had never fully considered. As she observed Crystal's patient and unconditional love for Lily, each word and gesture revealed the depth of their bond. For the first time, Diana began to see Crystal's true strength. Life with Jack was anything but easy, intense, filled with sacrifices, yet overflowing with love. Crystal approached everything with tireless dedication, supported at every step by Jack, who shared her responsibilities as an equal partner. What Diana once saw as an unfair rivalry now revealed itself to be a life built on genuine struggle and triumph. Diana couldn't deny the truth. Crystal was, indeed, an admirable woman. As the visit continued, Diana allowed herself to confront the reality she had ignored. The life Jack and Crystal had built wasn't flawless, but it was real. This realization stirred something within her. For the first time, Diana began to question her own actions and motivations. What she had tried to destroy was something genuine and heartfelt, something she had never been able to build herself. And with that realization came the beginning of a transformation Diana never thought possible. During her visit to Jack and Crystal's home, something began to shift within Diana. What initially seemed like mere curiosity transformed into a profound reflection on her own attitudes and choices. Diana observed Crystal with a mix of admiration and surprise. It wasn't just that Crystal was a good wife to Jack or a devoted caregiver to Lily. What truly moved Diana was the way Crystal seemed to do everything with a grace and mastery that she herself had never been able to achieve. Crystal's life, filled with challenges and responsibilities, was grounded in an unshakable love, something Diana had never known how to nurture. Slowly, Diana began to realize that her obsession with Jack and her desire to destroy Crystal stemmed from her own insecurities. She had always believed that as a successful and powerful woman, she could have anything she wanted, including Jack's love. But now, seeing the depth of connection between him and Crystal, Diana understood that what they shared was something neither money nor influence could buy. It was the kind of love she had never been able to find, not because of a lack of opportunities, but because she had never allowed herself to be vulnerable enough to build something like that. With this new perspective, Diana's envy of Crystal began to give way to an unexpected sense of respect. She saw, clearly, that Jack's happiness with Crystal was not a threat to her, but a reflection of what true love really meant. Diana, who had always prided herself on her independence and success, began to understand that these qualities alone could not fill the emotional void she had carried for so long. For the first time, she felt genuinely remorseful for all she had done to try to destroy Jack and Crystal's relationship. With a heavy heart, Diana realized it was time to do something she had never thought possible: ask for forgiveness. For years, she had fought for something that was never hers. And now, as she looked at Crystal, she understood that this woman, so different from her, deserved everything she had earned. In a gesture of humility that surprised even herself, Diana approached Crystal and sincerely apologized. She admitted to Crystal that she had fought against her for so long, driven by selfishness and envy, but now she saw the error of her ways. Crystal, ever generous and understanding, listened attentively to Diana's apology. Although she was aware of Diana's attempts to harm her, there was no resentment in her heart. For Crystal, forgiveness was a reflection of who she was, a woman driven by love and compassion. By accepting Diana's apology, Crystal closed a cycle of pain and rivalry, opening the door to a new beginning, not just for herself but also for Diana, who was finally starting to grasp the true value of love. With her life alongside Jack now more stable and having forgiven Diana, Crystal felt it was the right time to move forward with the mission she had promised Luna, uncovering more about her biological mother and, most importantly, finding her sister. The revelation that her mother was Mila Brandon and that she had an older sister still echoed in her mind. This mystery from the past could not be ignored, and Crystal knew she had to seek the answers she was missing. Determined to find her sister, she hired a detective to assist her in the investigation. The detective, an experienced professional, began searching for records about Mila Brandon and the adoption process of the two girls. Crystal knew this would be a journey full of ups and downs, and that time might have erased many clues. Nonetheless, she was resolute. With the detective's help, she hoped to uncover where her sister had been taken and how their lives had followed such divergent paths. The idea that a piece of her story remained hidden motivated her to keep going, even without knowing what she might find in the end. The days became a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Every new piece of information the detective uncovered was like another piece of a puzzle Crystal was assembling. Although the records were old and much of the information incomplete or lost, the detective gradually unearthed important clues about her sister's adoption. The documents revealed that the girl had been taken in by a relatively wealthy family and raised in an environment completely different from the one Crystal knew. From there, the pieces began to fit together. With the information the detective provided, Crystal started to envision the possibility of reuniting with her sister. A swirl of emotions filled her, desire to meet the person who shared her blood and uncertainty about how that reunion would unfold. Did her sister know of her existence? Was she also searching for answers, or had she gone through life never thinking about the past? These questions lingered in Crystal's mind as the detective came closer and closer to uncovering the truth. While the detective continued his search, Crystal tried to remain calm. She knew the final revelation could change her life in ways she could not yet predict. But above all, she was ready to face whatever came her way. The promise she had made to Luna and her desire to understand who she truly was propelled her forward, in search of a familial connection lost so many years ago. At last, the detective brought the news Crystal had been anxiously awaiting. After extensive research and many back-and-forth trips through old records and nearly lost information, he had closed the investigation. The revelations were astonishing. The sister Crystal had been searching for was much closer than she had ever imagined. Her name was Diana, the same Diana with whom she had shared such intense and tumultuous encounters. The two of them, unknowingly, had lived their lives in completely different worlds, but with an unbreakable connection, they were both daughters of Mila Brandon. The discovery hit Crystal like a thunderbolt. The woman she had seen for so long as a rival and adversary was now revealed to be her own flesh and blood. It was difficult to process this new reality, especially after all they had been through together, never suspecting their true bond. The detective explained that after Mila's death, Crystal had been adopted by Luna and Noah Smith, while Diana was taken in by a wealthy couple, Peter and Lauren Brown, who provided her with an elite education but little emotional nurturing. Crystal's mind was flooded with a torrent of questions. How would Diana react upon discovering they were sisters? Would it change the way they saw each other, or would it deepen the wounds of the past? Crystal knew that while their blood connection was significant, the relationship they had built up to this point couldn't be ignored. They had already shared so many difficult moments, and now the truth about their kinship added a new layer of complexity to their story. Peter and Lauren Brown, Diana's adoptive parents, were successful businesspeople who had raised their daughter with every privilege money could buy. However, the detective revealed that while Diana had lived a comfortable life, she had never received the affection and love that Crystal had been given by Luna and Noah. This explained much of Diana's behavior and her constant pursuit of validation through success and control. Crystal began to understand her sister's actions better, realizing that, deep down, Diana was also a wounded woman, searching for something she had never experienced. Now, with the truth revealed, Crystal faced a new dilemma: how to tell Diana they were sisters, and more importantly, how to rebuild what had been broken by years of ignorance. The answers weren't clear, but Crystal knew she had to find a way to approach Diana and navigate this new reality. Diana had always lived surrounded by comfort and luxury, raised in a family that never denied her anything material. Peter and Lauren, her adoptive parents, were prestigious figures in the business world, always focused on expanding their enterprises and securing the family legacy. From an early age, Diana was immersed in this world of power and success, where financial moves were far more important than any gesture of affection. Her upbringing was strict, focused on excellence and the need to always stay one step ahead, but it left no room for genuine warmth or emotional understanding. Growing up in this environment, Diana learned that success was achieved through strength, determination, and often cold calculation. She never had to fight for attention or approval. She was always the perfect heir in her parents' eyes. They showered her with expensive gifts and unique opportunities, but never taught her the value of true human connection. To Peter and Lauren, love was shown through accomplishments and achievements, not through hugs or words of support. As a result, Diana grew up believing that control and success were the only ways to earn respect from others. When she became an adult, Diana reflected those lessons in her own life. She built a personal empire, driven by the same determination she had learned from her parents. She never sought to achieve anything through affection or empathy. All she had to do was demonstrate her competence and power, and doors would open for her. The idea of vulnerability or depending on someone for love was completely foreign to Diana. She always believed that her independence and success were all she needed, even if it meant sacrificing deeper relationships. This cycle of success without affection left deep scars on Diana, though she didn't realize it immediately. Over time, her inability to emotionally connect with others began to impact her relationships. She tried to control the people around her in the same way she controlled her business dealings, believing that this was the key to maintaining power and respect. But the truth was, behind her impenetrable facade, there was a woman who had never learned the true meaning of love. And now, as an adult, she was beginning to feel the effects of that void. Despite all the privileges she had always had, Diana never had to fight for anyone's affection. Everything she wanted seemed to come automatically, but this left a gap in her life that she hadn't realized existed until recently. Now, with the revelation of her connection to Crystal, something within her was beginning to change. For the first time, Diana found herself questioning her own values and the emptiness that success had never been able to fill. Perhaps, for the first time in her life, she was ready to seek something beyond control, something that might finally bring her the peace she had long yearned for. With Peter and Lauren now retired, Diana had taken full control of the family businesses. She had spent years preparing for this moment, molded to lead and expand the legacy her parents had built. While they traveled the world, enjoying the fruits of a lifetime of hard work, Diana remained dedicated to maintaining the position of power the family had always held. She ran the businesses with a steady hand, determined to uphold the reputation of success that had always been associated with the Brown name. Yet, despite her competence and achievements, something still felt missing within Diana. When the detective revealed the truth about Crystal and Diana's kinship, Peter and Lauren were the first to express their surprise and emotion. The idea that Diana had a biological sister, adopted by another family, deeply touched them. To them, the sisters' reunion was something unexpected, but also an opportunity to rebuild bonds that had been broken since Diana's early life. Although they had always been focused on business, Peter and Lauren began to realize that there was more to life than material success. The reunion of the sisters brought a new dynamic to Diana's life, and her parents, even from afar, supported the discovery with great emotion. They recognized this as a chance for Diana to explore a side of her life she had never had the opportunity to experience. Being part of a true family, with blood ties and emotional connections that went beyond business. For Peter and Lauren, who had always provided Diana with the best financial resources, this moment brought a reflection on what truly mattered. During one of their travels, Peter and Lauren made a point to send a heartfelt message to Diana and Crystal, expressing their joy over the sisters' reunion. They were eager for the two to build a strong relationship, something they had never been able to provide emotionally for Diana. Now in their retirement, the couple reflected on the time they had spent focused on success, and the sisters' reunion brought a new perspective to their lives as well. Though physically distant, the emotional impact of the reunion resonated deeply in every word they sent. For Diana, her parents' support during this moment was unexpected but welcome. For the first time, she began to realize that her parents, despite their rigidity, were also open to exploring new ways of connecting. The reunion with Crystal opened doors for Diana to not only revisit her past but also reassess her relationship with Peter and Lauren, who, now retired, seemed more willing to explore what it truly meant to be a family. When the truth finally surfaced and Diana learned that Crystal was her biological sister, the impact was profound. Diana had always known she was adopted, but at the age of 3, she was too young to grasp what that truly meant. Throughout her life, the idea of having a biological family was a vague notion, something she rarely allowed herself to dwell on. Her adoptive parents, Peter and Lauren, had never hidden the truth about her adoption, but they also never encouraged her to explore her origins. For Diana, her life was defined by the present, surrounded by her family's business empire and her own ambitions. Learning that Crystal, the woman she had initially seen as a rival, was in fact her sister completely upended Diana's perspective. She had never imagined that one day she would find her sister in such an unexpected and complicated context. Diana was used to controlling every aspect of her life, but this discovery brought an emotional chaos she didn't know how to handle. On one hand, there was the excitement of knowing she had such a close blood connection. On the other, there was the confusion of how this revelation fit into the tumultuous relationship they had shared until now. Diana began to recall fragments of her childhood, hazy moments when she, as a little girl, didn't understand why she was being taken to live with a new family. She remembered fleeting images of her life before being adopted, but nothing concrete. In her adult life, Diana had rarely allowed herself to revisit those memories, choosing instead to focus on the present and the future. Now, however, those memories came rushing back, accompanied by the realization that she and Crystal had been separated by circumstances neither of them could control. The idea that the rivalry she had cultivated with Crystal was, in reality, a fight against her own sister made Diana reflect deeply on her actions. She had been so determined to win, to prove her worth through success, that she had never realized what she was truly searching for. Perhaps, deep down, the familial connection she had always lacked was the key to understanding why she felt so empty, even when surrounded by achievements. Now, her reunion with Crystal opened the door to a new possibility, the chance to build a genuine bond with someone who shared the same origins, even if their paths had been vastly different. Still processing all this new information, Diana began to understand that this might be the moment for change. Perhaps this was the opportunity she had always needed to reevaluate her priorities, her life, and finally grasp the true value of the affection she had always lacked. Now, standing before Crystal, she had the chance to rebuild what was lost and begin a new chapter in her story, a journey alongside her sister. Since the emotional turmoil and betrayal by Anthony, Diana had chosen to keep her distance from romantic relationships. Discovering that her assistant, someone she had trusted, had plotted an attack against Jack left her deeply scarred. For months, Diana focused solely on work and managing her family's business, avoiding any kind of emotional entanglement. She no longer saw the point in taking such risks, especially after the disappointments she had faced. However, over time, the loneliness began to weigh on her, and Diana realized she needed something beyond professional success. It was during this period of emotional withdrawal that Charles, the family's attorney and a longtime friend, began to appear more frequently in her life. Charles was a reliable, discreet, and steady presence who had supported Diana and her family during many difficult moments. With him, Diana found a different kind of companionship, someone who had known her for years and demanded nothing from her but her presence. Their bond began subtly, with no great expectations, just a friendship that gradually deepened into something more profound. Diana, who had always been independent and controlling in her previous relationships, found in Charles someone who respected her space and her complexities. He didn't try to change her or pressure her to be someone she wasn't. Instead, Charles provided a calm and stable presence, something Diana wasn't used to experiencing. For the first time, she felt she could relax and be herself without fear of judgment or unrealistic expectations. This ease that Charles brought into her life made Diana reconsider the possibility of opening her heart again. As time passed, Diana and Charles's relationship solidified. With his sensitivity, he understood the challenges she faced, both emotionally and professionally. Charles also became a source of support when Diana discovered the truth about Crystal, her sister, helping her process this new reality. What had started as a friendship grew into something more, and slowly, Diana realized she was ready to give love another chance, this time without the pressures that had always accompanied her past relationships. Her relationship with Charles represented a significant shift for Diana. He was unlike any other man she had known, and that made her feel safe in a way she had never experienced. Now, with his presence in her life, Diana began to believe it was possible to balance success with love, and that perhaps the affection and care she had always sought could be found in a relationship built on mutual respect and understanding. Throughout her journey with Crystal, something profound had shifted within Diana. Once driven by jealousy, pride, and an obsession with control, she began to recognize that her sister's true strength lay in the love and honesty she brought to everything she did. Every gesture from Crystal, from her tireless care for Lily to her way of facing life's challenges with compassion and dignity, touched Diana in ways she never thought possible. For the first time, Diana began to see the world through different eyes. Diana, who had always believed that power and success were the only ways to stand out, now found herself admiring qualities she had never valued before. Crystal, with her simplicity and dedication, showed Diana that true success wasn't measured by material achievements, but by the human connections built along the way. Diana, who had lived her life in a competitive and high-pressure environment, began to appreciate the value of affection and honesty that Crystal exemplified so naturally. The relationship between the two, once marked by conflict, was now blossoming into something far deeper. Diana's transformation was slow but steady. Gradually, she started to let go of her old beliefs and embrace a new way of looking at life. Crystal, without giving grand speeches or trying to change Diana directly, simply lived her truth, and that alone was enough to make an impact. Diana began to feel proud of her sister, not just because they were blood relatives, but because of the extraordinary woman Crystal had become. Crystal's example taught Diana lessons she had never learned in the world of business: the importance of forgiveness, empathy, and unconditional love. Over time, the bond between the sisters grew stronger. Diana, who once saw herself as superior, now recognized the greatness in Crystal. This admiration grew to the point where Diana began to draw inspiration from her sister, applying the principles of honesty and compassion she had observed in Crystal to her own life. The way Diana managed her business and personal relationships began to change. The power she once wielded with coldness and ruthlessness now carried a touch of empathy, something she had learned directly from Crystal. Now, alongside Crystal, Diana felt something she had never experienced before: genuine pride. It wasn't pride in her status or material accomplishments, but in the bond they had formed and the personal growth she had undergone. Diana, who once believed her life was complete with success alone, finally understood that what truly mattered was the love shared and the relationships cultivated throughout life. Crystal not only won Diana's heart but also transformed it, teaching her the true meaning of family. And so, the journey of Crystal and Diana, two sisters separated by fate and united by the power of love, comes to a close. Life had placed them on different paths, filled with pain, betrayals, and nearly insurmountable challenges, but also rich with opportunities for forgiveness, reconciliation, and rediscovering what truly matters. Selfishness, ambition, and insecurity tried to define their destinies, but in the end, it was true love that prevailed. Every choice, every action had its consequences, and the two women, so different, learned to overcome their fears and embrace the future with courage. Fate, unpredictable and relentless, showed that the most unexpected twists can guide us to where we were always meant to be. And now, after a long and difficult journey, Crystal and Diana finally understood that no matter the mistakes made along the way, there is always a chance for redemption, as long as we are willing to face the hardest truths and allow ourselves to be completely transformed. If the story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue discovering more inspiring stories like this one.